Welcome to our next lecture on Mesilat Yesharim, the pathways or the path of the just. We are about to begin chapter 13, Perek Yud Gimel, and we are about to study the midah, the trait of Perishut, which variously translated as abstinence. Um, the idea of Perishut, I wish I had a better translation of the word, but I will describe what Perishut means. And then as we study the Mesilat Yesharim's, the Ramchal's discussion of Perishut, we'll get a better idea of what he thinks about it and how he describes it. And then maybe we can come up with a better translation of our own of the word. But the bottom line of Perishut means to withdraw oneself away from things that are evil, from things, but not necessarily from things that are evil themselves, because that's what he talked about, zihirut. That was back in the chapter 3, right, where he talked about being careful and cautious not to do things that are wrong. Here he's talking about keep staying away from the things that lead you down the path towards things that are wrong, right? In other words, it's another step removed, right? And that's what Perishut means. So abstaining from things that otherwise are technically okay, are technically permitted, but we all know that where that path goes, right? And that's really what Perishut means. So let's begin this study. And as usual, I'm going to read from the Hebrew. If you want to ask any questions or comment, just feel free to do so. So, and if you're watching online, then you can unmute yourself and talk. Perishut, the idea of Perishut, the trait or the character trait of Perishut, which I'll call it abstinence for now until we have a better word. Hitchilat hachasidut is the beginning, precedes the next step, which is piety. I don't know, there may be other translations to chasidut, but I'm going to use piety for that. And the idea being that it's similar to what we had before with zihirut and zirizut, which he's going to say now. V'tireh, and you'll see, and it'll be obvious, shekol mashe be'arnu ad ata, everything that we talked about until now, hu mashe mitzarech al adam l'sheyeh tzaddik, was that which a person needs in order to be considered a tzaddik. In other words, to be considered righteous, to be good. We talked to you about all the kinds of things you should do and all the kinds of things you shouldn't do, how you should do them, how you should avoid doing them, etc. And that's how you become a good person, a tzaddik, which is it's a very nice compliment. But it's not quite as far as we want to go. It's not the goal of the Torah is to get us more than just doing everything right. And we're going to discuss what the next step is. Umikanu lahala, from here on, so the Ramchal is kind of dividing his book in half. Up till now is what you need to be a good person. Now is going to be how you be even more special than that, right? How you go beyond just doing doing the right thing, but beyond that to be even more special. The goal of this is to be a chassid, to be pious. V'nimsa, and as it turns out, ha-perishut im ha-chasidut, the comparison between perishut, which I'm translating now as abstinence, as it relates to piety, who kamo hazihirut im hazrizut, it's similar to the being careful, the caution, which we discussed before, which is paired with zirizut, doing things with excitement, with zeal. Thank you. Each one, each one of them is the staying away from the things that are wrong, and the other one is referring to the actions of the things that are right, that are good. So Perishut is going to precede the next step, which is chasidut, which is piety. V'hine. Klal ha-perishut, the general idea of the bottom line of this idea of abstinence is hu masha amru zichronim lebracha, is that which the Chazal said, which the rabbis taught us, kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lach, make yourself holy through the things that are technically permitted to you. What the rabbis are teaching there in that statement are saying that the place where you find special holiness is not just staying away from the things that are not allowed, But the things that are technically allowed, but you make yourself especially holy by staying away from them. And we're going to see soon, he's going to describe, because of the places where certain activities can lead, right? Vizos hi hora'asa shel hamila atzma. And this is exactly what the word itself means. The word perishut, the word which we're translating as abstinence. So tzolomar, it means to say lios porish. You should separate yourself, abstain yourself, umarchik atzmo min hadavar. Take yourself away, far away from the thing. The classic example that I'm going to probably use many times is to say you're a person knows that he has a propensity to be an alcoholic, right? And you want to avoid it. So it's one thing not drinking alcohol, but if you really want to stay away, he never said he's not going to walk into a bar. He just said he's not going to drink alcohol. But walking into a bar is probably not the best idea, right? Because it's an activity which it's going to lead. The next thing you know, he'll go. Then the next thing he'll be talking, and the next thing, just one little drink, and the next thing you know, he's drunk again, right? So Perishut is the statement that not only am I not going to drink, but I'm not going to walk into a bar. And if you think about that analogy, I think the whole chapter which we're about to study is going to make sense. That's what Perishut means. Staying away from those things which have the potential to lead you in the wrong direction, even if technically there's nothing actually wrong with them. So it's referring to osar al atzmo dvar heter. A person forbids himself from doing something which is technically permissible. And the intention is lishelo yivka be'isra atzmo. The purpose and point of it is in order to avoid the actual prohibition, the end of the line, the thing which he really wants to stay away from. So and the purpose of this all is shekol davar sheyuchal yivada mimenu geram asra, anything which can result in doing something wrong. Even though right now you may not be actually doing the wrong thing itself, and certainly it's not actually wrong what you're doing now, but nonetheless, a person should stay away from it and separate himself from such things because of where they can lead. V'hisbonim v'tira, and I want you to think about this, and if you think about it, you'll realize sheyesh kan shalosh madregos. There's 3 levels of things to stay away from. Yesha hisurim atzmam. There's the actual prohibition. You should not lie, you should not steal, you should not commit adultery, you should not do bad things, whatever, a long list of bad things you could do, don't do them. That's number 1. But then there are also the rules that have been put into place, the official rules that have been put in place to keep us away from doing them, the rules that the rabbis enacted to try to keep us from doing them. The various decrees that have been declared over the centuries, and the guardrails that our rabbis over the centuries, our sages, may their memory be blessed, declared, I'll call Yisrael and all Jews to keep. So there are many rabbinic decrees, which are decrees that we're obligated to keep. And you could see this in a secular analogy as well. There's certain laws that are designed not so much because they themselves are bad, but because we know where it could potentially lead. But then there's the third level. There's those things which anyone who wants to be a parosh, who wants to be a person that attains this special character trait of perishut, right? That does above and beyond even what the decrees are. Leos kones b'soch shelo, to go enter into his own domain rather than exit into the outside domain where he could be pulled in other directions. Ubona gederim la'atzmo, and build his own fences in order that he knows that he himself needs in order to keep himself on the right track. Right? To set aside from those things which are actually permitted, things that have not been prohibited to all of the people of Israel, but nonetheless to stay away from them, so he can stay very far away from falling into an evil trap. So that's the idea. That's what really just described what Perishut means. Go ahead. Do you have something? No? Okay. So im tomar. So you're going to ask, right, the obvious question. Minayin lanu lios mosifim v'olchim b'yisurim. Who told us that we should be adding things, right? It's not enough. There's plenty of prohibitions for us to stay away from. And then you tack onto that the rabbinic prohibitions that we're supposed to stay away from even more. And now you want to add even more. Like, what's going on over here? Like, what's happening? And I'll prove to you from the rabbis that words that we're not supposed to add things, prohibitions, right? Because then he'll bring a couple of quotes. Who tells that we should go and add more and more prohibitions upon ourselves? Didn't our sages teach us? Lo dayach masha asra Torah. They taught us, it said, it's not enough for you that the Torah already made things prohibited. You're going to add new things, new prohibitions that haven't been prohibited. Who do you think you are? There's not enough prohibitions in the Torah. You have to add more, right? That which the sages in their wisdom saw appropriate to prohibit, they already made them. There's enough decrees from the rabbis over the centuries of things that we're not allowed to do because they were afraid we were going to go down a bad path. Those things that they didn't decree on, they left them permissible because they decided that these things should remain permissible, right? So why are you making them prohibited, right? Why should we go and now make up new decrees that haven't been decreed? That they've made plenty of decrees. If they needed more, they would have made more. There's no shortage of decrees, right? So who are we to go and make more? And where does it end? It's a slippery slope, but the slope going uphill instead of downhill. Like you keep going up and up, right? When does it stop, right? What are you going to do? You're going to sit down and you're not allowed to have any pleasure. You're not allowed to drink a soda. You're not allowed to nothing because everything is a pleasure that's going to lead you, and you're going to like this. The next thing you're going to want that. Next thing you're going to want that. The next thing you're going to be doing things you're not allowed to do. So, like, where does it end, right? And the rabbis, the sages have taught us that in the future, when we go to give, go in front of the proverbial final court, in front of God, when he sits down and judges us all for our behaviors and our actions in our lifetimes, God, we're going to have to explain, right, before God himself, I'll call Masharo, all of the beautiful things that we saw that we did not partake in. If there was a beautiful fruit that we saw and we should have eaten it, could have eaten it, and we didn't, God's going to say, why didn't you enjoy the fruit that I gave you? Right? Why didn't you enjoy the life that I gave you? Why didn't I gave you an opportunity? We're going to have to answer for this. And you didn't enjoy it, even though you were allowed to. It's not necessary to have a special stamp of a hashgacha on that fruit. There was a kosher, nice, beautiful fruit. You should have eaten it. And they derived this lesson from a verse which says, whatever my eyes asked for, I did not withhold from them. So the bottom line is, so what is this business? How could you tell me that there's this special trait and it's wonderful to be a poresh, to have this trait of perishut, right? I'm not translating it deliberately because I don't have a good English translation for it yet. But if we see from the rabbi's teachings that's not what we're supposed to do. They already prohibited enough. We don't need more prohibitions. So hateshuvahi, and really the main idea of this entire chapter we're going to see is how he's going to try to teach us how to achieve this balance, how both to be a parosh, separating ourselves from anything that could lead us in a bad path, while at the same time enjoying the parts of our lives that we're supposed to enjoy and participate in. And that's the balance. So he's going to flip to the other side now. So the answer is as follows. The perishut, the idea of separating ourselves, of abstaining from things that can lead us in the wrong way, is definitely necessary. And in case you don't believe me, I'll bring you more proofs on the other way, because as the sages taught us, you should be holy. When the Torah says you should, what does holy mean? Pirushim to you. You should separate yourselves. Separate yourselves from things that you otherwise are not supposed to indulge in. Otherwise are technically allowed to indulge in. Od Amru, and they also said, Kala Yoshev B'tanis, a person that takes fasts upon himself, Nikra Kadosh, is considered holy. Kavachomer mi Nazir, and they said, as we see that a Nazir, a Nazirite, is considered holy. So, and he's only fasting from certain things. Od Amru, they said, first of all, furthermore, Tzaddik ochel esova nafsho. A tzaddik, a righteous person, eats only in order to satisfy his hunger, but not for special pleasure. Zechizkiyahu Melech Yehuda referred to the Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda, that they would bring him all kinds of vegetables, but he only partook what he needed, right? Od Amru b'Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and it says about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the redactor of the Mishnah, one of the most famous and most important rabbinic leaders of all time. Shebishas Misaso, at the time of his death, Zakaf Eser Atzvosav, he held up his 10 fingers, V'amar, and he said, Goliv Yadua, it's revealed and known, L'fanecha, before you, God, Shalom Nehanesi min olam hazeh, I had no pleasure from this world, Afilu be'etzba ketana shali, even in my tiny little finger, my pinky finger. Even though we know from historical sources and from the Talmud all over the place that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was a very wealthy man, but he still was able to declare that upon his deathbed. Od Amru ad adam mispalel al divrei Torah. If a person is going to pray regarding words of Torah, that they should enter into his very being, he should also pray that eating and drinking, that they shouldn't enter into his being. In other words, he shouldn't become the kind of person who's constantly pursuing those types of pleasures. So, hein kol eila ma'amorim, all of these sayings and Morim teach us beferish clearly that tzorach haprish, that there is a need for us to separate ourselves. So he's setting up the question. This question is even stronger now. On the one hand, I gave you a whole list of things telling us that we're supposed to enjoy this world. On the other hand, I'm giving a whole, and we're not supposed to add new prohibitions. On the other hand, I'm showing you that you are supposed to be a porish, right? So, in the end of the story, after all this is all these wonderful sayings, we need to explain, we need to reconcile these very conflicting statements, these whatever, you know what I mean? Fine. The idea is as follows. Right? So how do you strike the right balance? Certainly there are many distinctions that one and principles that we need to that exist here that we need to kind of hash out and filter through. Yesh prishus and it's tavinubo. There is a type of abstinence that we are commanded to do, that we are supposed to do. V'yesh prishus, and there's also another type of abstinence shehezarnu alav levilti hikashobo, that we are warned against falling into that trap of abstinence. So abstinence is both something that we are supposed to do, right? And it's also something that we are supposed to stay away from. And we need to differentiate and identify what those parts are. Just give me 1 second. No, it's nothing. I thought it might be the hospital, but and this is what Shlomo said, King Solomon said in Ecclesiastes and Kohelet, Al tihi tzadik harbe. Don't be too much of a righteous person. Be a righteous person, but not too much. So there's a balance, and we need to find that balance, and we need a principle on how to define that balance. And as we study his answer, I want you to recognize that I think the rule that he's going to teach us as to how to find the balance is a rule that I think we'll find is very relevant, and it's relevant pretty much for all time, as opposed to the examples that he gives may change over different times and circumstances, right? So in other words, if he says something that doesn't quite sit right with us in our 2026 mentality, you have to understand that when he illustrates the point that way, he's the point, the how to find the balance will still make a lot of sense. So let's give him a chance, and you can tell me if you agree or not. Now let us describe the good kind of prishut, the good kind of abstinence that you're supposed to have. V'nomar, and we will say as follows: even though we've explained that everything that we do is a test, right? Every day is a trial for us. How do we react to the challenges that are presented to us that day? We're always on trial, whether we like it or not. It doesn't sound like a pleasant thought, but we all know this is real. It's true. Every single moment is a moment where we can make a decision. We can do A, we can do B, we can do C, and we decide, and it's a test. We already said before, and we proved that this is the case, and it became clear as truth to us as well. The weakness of the human of the personality of the human being, and the closeness we are to tripping up and falling into all kinds of evil traps, right? Because we're living on the edge. We make the wrong decision for selfish reasons, and we can go in the wrong direction. It becomes clear that the kind of prishut, the kind of abstinence that we're looking for is the kind that follows the following rule: that anything that can lead us into the wrong direction, into the test of the day, if this action is the kind of action that could lead us down that bad path, then that's a path we should probably avoid, right? So Kadeshi and Nishmar Yosem and Arash Ebraglam, because we want so that you can be careful not to end up at the end of the path. So when we're confronted by a situation, and you can go down path A or you can go down path B, and they both are okay. They're both legal, right? They're both more or less okay according to the Torah. But A, and you realize that A could very easily lead you to the bad place, right? And B is a lot less likely to, you know what? You should probably strongly consider not going down path A, right? Even if technically that decision isn't so problematic, but you know where it's going, right? And this is part of his guide to understanding the difference, but we still have a lot more to understand. So, Kadeshi and Nish, okay. There isn't any, and literally he means any worldly pleasure that doesn't also pull in its wake something that's wrong. Now, what he means here is as follows. He doesn't mean that it's impossible to enjoy, a good piece of food or whatever. What he means here is that a ta'anug olami is a pleasure that is only for this world, that is purely for selfish only reasons. There's no such thing as making a decision that's the kind of decision that you're making because you want to enjoy something specifically only for enjoyment purpose, right? That doesn't potentially lead down a bad path. Derech Mashal, let me give you an example. Hamachal v'hamishte, eating and drinking. Kisheniku mikol isuri achila, right? Assuming that you've eliminated all of the prohibitions that are involved in eating, and the food is 100% kosher, and everything is fine, and it's ethically sourced, and it's whatever, it's organic, and it's kosher from all levels, ethical, moral, environmental levels. You have a good piece of food in front of you, right? So amnam milei hakares, filling your belly. And he specifically uses a term, milei hakares, which is that's kind of a base term, like filling up your belly, like engorging yourself, right? In this good food, Moshe Chachov Bikaso will lead you down the path of eventually, or can lead you down the path of throwing away the yoke, of throwing away your responsibilities. Mishteh hayayin, and drinking wine. We all know Moshe Chachov Hazanos can lead to promiscuity. And sexual harassment and all kinds of things that we all know alcohol leads to, right? Osharmin and rum and all kinds of bad things. Kol sheken shebeyosa adam margil asmo lisboa me'achil shtiyah. If a person makes it his regular practice to constantly fill himself up with eating and drinking, and then one day you're missing the wine. Now you don't have it, right? And you don't have what you're looking for. You end up having a lot more pain, and you feel that it's missing. And then the next thing you do is you start working really hard. In other words, beyond what you really needed to do to live, right? And in the end, it leads you to making purchases that might not be completely ethical, so that you can always enjoy these wonderful things that you want to enjoy. And if one day you realize that you can't afford it and the legal route, then you end up taking the not so legal route. And before you know it, you're involved in very unethical and inappropriate practices. And eventually you end up outright stealing and harming other people. And then you end up swearing falsely because, of course, instead of ever admitting that you did anything wrong, you're constantly claiming you never did anything wrong, and you end up swearing that you never did anything wrong, and so the whole thing is one big spiral downhill. And all of the sins which you can easily imagine come in its wake. And now what are you not doing? You're wasting your time. You're not spending your time studying Torah. You're not spending your time worshiping God. You're not spending your time praying. You're not spending your time doing all the positive things which you could have been doing. And this is what they said when it was referring to the wayward son in the Torah, right? The Amda Torah al Sof Data, the Torah was teaching us what the end result of this kind of behavior is. Not so much that the behavior that he was engaged in the beginning was the problem, but we know where it leads, right? We know where it goes. He starts off taking things from his parents that he's not supposed to, and the next thing he's doing, he's a bandit, he's a robber, and he's taking things from other people. And the same thing when it says regarding the issues of promiscuity, someone who sees a sota, a woman who was accused of being unfaithful. So when you start seeing that, and you say, oh, so he gets started with a little bit of flirting, and then a little bit of talking, and then a little bit of this and a little bit of that. The next thing, it ended up in a bad place. So Vetira, and it should be obvious. So this is a very good plan, a very good strategy to save yourself from your inclination to go down the wrong path. Because once you get all the way down there, once you're deeply entrenched in the corruption, it's extremely difficult to extricate yourself. It's a lot easier to make up more lies and more cover-up stories, to stay as deeply entrenched as you are and dig yourself down even deeper. It's much easier to just stay out of that whole thing in the first place, right? Because once you're down that hole, getting out of the hole is very difficult. While you're still far away, right? So when somebody comes to you and tells you, oh, I have this great business deal, I'm thinking of a particular event in my life, right? You want to make a lot of money? I do that. My first thing was, luckily I said this, is it ethical? I mean, it's legal. And I looked at what he was suggesting. It was, I guess, I wasn't an expert. It seemed legal. But I said, it's just something doesn't smell right. I don't want to tell you where that guy is right now. But thankfully I turned away in the beginning. But imagine had I invested, $20,000, and then you get stuck in it, and the next thing, well, now you lost that, and the next thing, before you know it, you're the only way to stay in, to keep your head above water is by doing things that are truly dishonest. Because it's easier to stay away when you're far away, because the way your inclination draws you in is by getting you stuck in this pit. That's how he draws you in. So, hine habeila im ishto. So, for example, what about sexual relationships with one's own spouse? And there's different attitudes toward sex nowadays than there were back then. But the example is still relevant for us today because we can learn this lesson that he's trying to teach us about how human nature works. So of course it's totally permissible. Amnam kvar tiknu tvila labali krayin. The Chazal made a rule that we should go to the mikvah, that a man should go to the mikvah after he has an emission of semen, after he has an ejaculation. We don't keep this anymore nowadays for various reasons, but there was such a decree. But why did they make this decree? They didn't want that the rabbinic students should be mitzuyim eitzel neshem kitana golem, should be hanging around their wives like roosters. Even though clearly sex with one's spouse is totally permissible. So it ends up, you end up being involved in this particular area of desire. And eventually that could lead you into places that could be prohibited. There's a small limb on a human being. It's referring to the penis. If you make it really satisfied, if you constantly use it, you end up always being hungry for more. Marivo, but if you make it hungry and you control it properly, then savea, then it's satisfied. Velo od, that's a famous saying. Velo od she'afilu b'shah haru'uya v'ya'esa hogun. Even at the proper time, they would said about certain sages, he would uncover only part of the penis, and the other parts would covered in order not to drive too much pleasure, right? He was like being pushed by a demon as opposed to running after his lust. What about things that we wear, things that we clothe ourselves in? When we put on fancy clothes, right? Nice clothes, pretty clothes meant to attract, right? Lo is hira Torah, from the Torah didn't give us any rules. You're not allowed to wear pretty clothes, right? Oh, al tavnisam, right? The Torah gave us a few small rules about mixing kinds and about wearing tzitzis, right? Beyond those rules, clothing is clothing. You can wear whatever you want, right? Who doesn't know? Everybody knows. When somebody goes and dresses in grandiose royal clothing, the harikma, and wearing all luxurious embroidered things, what happens? The person feels arrogant and prideful, and begam has nusig bolba, and it leads to promiscuity. Aside from obvious, the jealousy that it causes when other people see you're wearing fancy clothes that they can't necessarily afford, and via tava, and it leads to desire for more wealth via oshek, and one person and fraudulently taking advantage of other people in order, because everyone wants to wear the nice suit, the nice dress, right? It's a similar, nowadays we'd say, the nice car, the nice house, the nice whatever, even though there's because what happens when everyone is trying to get something that's expensive? People end up doing things that are inappropriate in order to obtain things that are expensive. Right? As soon as a person is standing on his heels, and he's fixing his hair and he's setting up his suit real nice, right? Amar Zeshali, that's when the evil inclination says, I got this guy, he's mine, right? Hatil v'adibur, what about going on trips and speaking? Im eno bidvar iser, clearly there's nothing, if you're not doing anything wrong, if you're just going, Vaday din Torah muter, certainly the Torah allows it. Amnam, however, kama bitul Torah nimshach mimenu, how much waste of time that could have been used for Torah, for other worthy endeavors are you doing? And more that, and not only missing out on good opportunities, kama min lashon hara, how much does, once you start talking, even if it's permissible, first you're talking about the weather, the next thing you're talking about, did you see what so-and-so did? What so-and-so said? The weather. Oh, did you see the raincoats that she had in the rain yesterday? So kamam and hashkarim, and then you start lying and litzanas and being cynical and not taking things seriously. It's impossible that if after speaking too much, there's going to definitely be some sin involved. I saw you raise your hand, but I want to keep going because
go ahead.
Klal hadavar, the general rule is right? Kivan shekol inyanei ha'olam einam ela sakonos atzumos. All of the matters of this world involve serious risks. Ech lo yishubach mi sheyirtze limolet mehem. How is it? It's certainly it's impossible to imagine that a person would not be considered praiseworthy if he tries to stay away from them. And somebody who tries his hardest to stay away from these kinds of things, right? That is the kind of abstinence that's good. Staying away from things that can lead you in a bad direction. Now, you should only take from this world things things that you need because of their need, right? Because they're necessary for our human nature. Now, this is where this guidance that he just gave us in the last paragraph, it also enables us to relate some of the examples he gave to our time. Like nowadays, say for example, the tiyul. Like I love to go hiking, right? So would the Ramchal have criticized my hiking? I don't know. Maybe in his context, he would say, "Who needs to go to the mountains? You could be learning Torah, right?" Right? But what he just said was, he said, "Asher lo b'tiv'o elav," in your nature, is this the kind of thing that you need for your life? And that's the judgment we have to make. Are you doing this because this is important for you to be a better person? Is this important, something that you need for your mental health, for your psychological health, for your social health? Then go ahead, then do it, right? So it's not so much the examples that he gave us before, wearing nice clothes. So why are you wearing nice clothes? Is it because you need to look like a decent person when you go to work? You can't go in tattered things. People have to look up to you. They have to respect you. They have to see that you're clean, that you're neat, But on the other hand, if you're wearing something fancy simply because you want to show off and it's not necessary for the occasion and it's not appropriate for the occasion, then you really need to think twice about it. So that's the guidance that he's giving here. Right? Something which is it necessary for the nature of who you are and your life? And if the answer is yes, then fine, go ahead and do it. If the answer is you're only doing it, all right, just simply to engage and indulge in worldly pleasures, then you know where that can potentially lead, and you should probably strongly consider staying away. So this is what it means when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he held up his fingers at the end of his life, in the statement that I mentioned before, that he didn't benefit from this world, even in my little finger. What did he mean? Of course he benefited. We know he was one of the wealthiest people of the time. He was a leader. He was it's known as Rabbi Yehuda, Judah the Prince. He was the leader of the Jewish people of the time. All right, we know that he was the Prince of Israel. His table was the table of kings, because that was necessary because of his exalted position in life, who he was, his leadership position, his responsibilities. So what he was saying was not that I didn't enjoy. Of course, if he sat by a table full of good food, clearly he must have eaten some of it, right? So he enjoyed the food, and but the pleasure accrued wasn't for him. It wasn't for this world. It wasn't min olam hazeh. He wasn't enjoying it because he wanted to enjoy this world just for the sake of pleasure. He was involved in it because it was important for his situation, for where he was in his life, and he used that for the purposes that were appropriate. Because he was so wealthy, like it says, Shnei Goyim B'Vitnech. The Gemara gets famous play on words where it talks about there's two nations in your belly. That's the reference to Rivka when she was pregnant with Yaakov and Esau. So the Gemara says the Rebbe of Antoninos. It's similar to Rebbe, that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Antoninos, who was presumably a Roman a governor of some sort, or whatever they called them in those days, of the Palestine region of the time, right? And Shalom Pasak Me'al Shulchanim, but they were both very wealthy and they were good friends. There's lots of stories of their discussions back and forth. That on their table they had lotznon, v'lo chazeres, v'lo kishu, and all of these vegetables. Not in the summer, not in the winter. So they were so wealthy, they were able to import fresh vegetables from all over the Roman Empire, even when they were not in season, right? Nowadays, it's easy. We go to the grocery store all year round. We expect to find strawberries without realizing that in order to have strawberries in February, they have to be shipping them from Honduras. But nowadays, we expect it. In those days, that was an incredible, special luxury. So,
Oh,
yes, go ahead.
isn't it contradictory when he says, I didn't derive any pleasure in this world, to saying that God's going to say, how come you didn't get pleasure from what I put in that, in the world? I mean, it seems I understand the going to excess, but
Yeah.
it seems
Well,
to be a little contradictory.
well, that is the contradiction that he's trying to answer now. Like, how do we find this balance? He didn't finish his answer yet. So he's in the middle of answering. And the beginning of the answer is that you have to look at the particular pleasure you're partaking in. Is it something that's necessary? Is it something that's important for your life, for your growth, for who you are, for the things you want to accomplish and achieve that are good? If so, go ahead and indulge. If it's not, if the only purpose of it is simply for pleasure in this world, then it has the potential to lead you in the bad direction. But that's not the full answer. That's half the answer. We still have to keep going to learn the whole answer. But you're asking exactly the right question, and that's exactly the contradiction he's trying to answer. I want to try in the next 15 minutes to finish this chapter because it's all one thought, and I really want to have that thought. So so all of these things that I mentioned before about deriving pleasure and benefit from this world, right? They all teach us that a person is supposed to separate himself from pleasures in order to stay away from those dangers that we described. So now you're going to ask, right? Which Leslie pretty much did just ask. If that's the case, right? If it's so important for us to be separated from things in this world, right? Why didn't the rabbis tell us we're not allowed to do all these things? Well, this wasn't exactly the same as your question. I'm sorry, but the bottom line. So if this is the case, so why didn't they give us instructions? Nobody should have any pleasure. Nobody should eat any of this. You should eat only raw, I don't know, whatever, and stale bread, and that's it, right? Because there were many gezeros. The answer to that is very simple. They're not going to make decrees that are impossible to keep, right? They're not going to declare that we should all sit on a mountaintop and not be involved in this world. Not everyone can be so pious. And for some people, it's okay if you just stay away from the really bad things. Those unique, special individuals that truly want to be close to God, and to thus benefit those that are around them. This is a crucial point here, that when we talk about a pious person, we don't mean a person a monk sitting in a monastery that has no relationship with anyone. They have to be benefiting the others that are around them, right? Doing good things for the people around them. It's for them that we discuss this idea of Perishut. This is what God chose. It's impossible that everyone can have this trait. There's different levels. Each person according to his own abilities. At least the special people, the special individuals, right, that prepare themselves properly. And through them, those that are prepared, that do prepare themselves, can thus give merit to even those that haven't done as much work by bringing the presence of God into the community. Like they explain the famous idea of the 4 species of the lulav. Because one of the species represents a tzaddik who's a good person and has good deeds, and so on, without going into that whole thing. But we're still not finished the answer yet. But we're almost there. Regarding Elijah, the prophet Elijah, that he said in a story that's recounted in the Talmud, De'ula bar Koshev, And I'm sorry, I did not remember what that story was. I didn't have a chance to look it up before. I apologize. Kisheheshivo below Mishnahi. So Afu Amarlo Mishnas Chasidimi. Right? Is it in other words, am I not? He said, am I not doing the law? And then he said, well, are you not doing that which a pious person is supposed to do? Differentiating between those two levels. And what is the bad kind of perishut? And what's the flip side? Right? The bad kind of abstinence. I've been praising all this abstinence, but what's the kind of abstinence that we should stay away from? Ukiderech hagoyim haschal, like the foolish Gentiles, right? Asher lo dai she'enam lochim min olam she'en lemechrach bo. It's not only that they abstain from the things that they don't need. They stay away from things that are necessary for their health, like unnecessary fasting, unnecessary separating yourself from society, unnecessarily separating yourself from relationships with your wives. He specifically had in mind the idea of celibacy for priests, things like that. The yasru gufram, and they torture their bodies, b'yisur, and the idea of whipping oneself, right? With whippings that are unnecessary, dvarim zarim, and strange things that God has no desire for us to inflict pain upon ourselves for no reason. The Chachamim said, it's prohibited for a person to torture himself and to hurt himself, right? And regarding charity, right? If a person is poor and needs food to eat, and somebody offers him charity, if you refuse that, if you need it, and you don't take it, you're a murderer, even if the person you're murdering is yourself, right? Right, where it says where the Torah is referring to the verse lenefesh chaya, to a living soul. Neshama shenasati b'hachieusa, the soul I gave you, give it life, sustain it. V'yamru, and they said, kol hayoshev b'tanis, if you sit in a fast, nikra chote, you're considered a sinner. This is the flip side of what I said before about how a person who fasts is considered praiseworthy. V'hem miduha b'delo matzi mitzayir nafshe. And they assumed a kind of person, if you cannot handle it, if you're causing yourself needless suffering, then you're going too far. The Hillel would say, "Gomel nafsho ish chased." A person who is good to himself is a kind person. Alachilas haboker, he was saying that, referring to eating breakfast in the morning. And he would wash himself, his face and his hands, l'chod kono, in order to be clean before God. Kavachomer midyoknos hamalachim, and certainly, if they wash the statues of the kings, then I, as a human being who's made in the image of God, is a statue. But this last paragraph is kind of sums up the whole idea, and I really want to read it, and then we'll have a few minutes to talk. This is the true rule, and this rule we can I think take with us, and apply it to our own lives. Anything that is not necessary for a person regarding this world, worldly things, it's better to stay away from them. And anything that you do need for this world, for whatever reason that is. And when he's saying that means if it's psychological, if it's So technically speaking, maybe having this soda might not be totally necessary, right? But if we look at it from a broader perspective, the fact that, having the camaraderie of being with other people and the kind of things we gain in all of our lives from having these friendships and relationships and discussions and sharing wisdom and knowledge, so that is mukhraq, that is necessary, right? And this is the rule that he's saying, for me'ezet tam she'eh, regardless of the reason why it's necessary in your life. But if it's necessary, then go ahead, right? Indulge in it, right? And because it's necessary, kivan she'hu mukhrach lo, imhu porish mimenu, if you stay away from it, harei zachote, then you're a sinner. If you're saying, I don't want to go because somebody might give me a good soda to drink, right? Then you're being a sinner, right? You're staying away from something that's important. Right? This is a trustworthy, solid rule that you should remember. And the flip side, of course, being that if the reason for you attending whatever event it is, or indulging in whatever it is you're about to indulge, is purely and only for your own benefit, and it's not necessary, it's not needed, and the only thing involved is pure selfish pleasure, then you should strongly consider, even if it's technically permissible, you should strongly consider staying away from it because of where it could take you, what road it can lead you down. Mishpat hapratim al pi haklal hazeh einu masher al shikul hadas. But understanding and judging and discerning the details of what I just said, it's something that a person really has to have proper shikul hadas, proper not just knowledge, but proper discernment. You have to really think about it, and it's not so easy. I gave you a solid rule, but to understand the details and to know which situation is which takes some serious thought. And according to how smart you are and how much you use your mind to differentiate between the good path and the bad path, that's how a person is praised. Right? I can't sit here and go through every single aspect of life, every single decision that we have to confront in our lives, and of course, it's endless the amount that they are. But a person can't even think about everything all at once. Each time we're presented with a challenge, remember this rule, right? Is this something that's important? Am I doing this because it really means something, or am I doing this plainly and simply for selfish reasons? And that should give you the best kind of guide that you need to decide which way to go. Yeah, I really wanted to get through the whole chapter because it's really all one big thought. It's not like I can't really divide it up. But now we still got a few minutes to talk. So now I'll open the floor. And I know Jeff had his hand up for the whole time. So go ahead, fire away.
Would you agree? I'm just reading the English translation because your last summary was a little less severe than at least this translation. And this says, you must accept as a true principle that a man should abstain from things in this world which are not absolutely necessary. Not absolutely necessary. My first question is, I went to a good university, liberal arts, Ivy League. My kids did. I worked hard to send them there. Doesn't this suggest or demand closing down all of our wonderful universities that we aspire to and what many of us have graduated for? Because if the requirement is, which are not absolutely necessary, reading novels, reading literature, reading art.
See, this is what he said. It requires a shikul hadas. Shikul hadas means evaluating, weighing the balances in our minds, in our knowledge, right? And by the way, I don't know
which are not absolutely necessary. It was not absolutely.
Well, first of all, the word absolute does not appear in the.
Oh, Hebrew. Is that right? Oh, good. No. Thank you. He went overboard.
It says necessary. It doesn't say absolutely necessary.
Thank you very much. Right? I feel so much better.
And remember, and I softened it for a reason, because he explicitly said, everything that is necessary, for whatever reason it might be necessary.
Yeah.
So in other words, the Ramchal is deliberately softening the idea of necessary. He's deliberately
I wish Mordecai Kaplan had that softening in his translation.
Right, because the softening is it's clear that the Ramchal is trying to soften what necessary is. Okay. And he says it requires a shikul hadas. In other words, a shikul hadas means that each one of us needs to make this decision for ourselves, right? It's not something that I could tell you, like, do I know what's necessary for you, right? Okay. So it might be necessary for me to do X, Y, Z, right? But it might not be necessary for you to do the same thing, right? We only one that really knows, but it has to be a true shikul hadas. We have to do it with as unselfish reasoning as we possibly can. Billy, okay. Go ahead. You wanted to
thank you.
Oh, I was gonna say that after this full chapter, I think abstinence is a great word, and I think for the denotation of the word, but also the connotation, which is it's used in religious senses for, you're being abstinent, and and the monks and hiding yourself away and abstaining from this, from that. I feel like it actually works well with what he's talking about.
Okay. The only thing to me, that when you say abstinent, it sounds like stay away from everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I guess he had to be clear, like he had abstinent but not abstinent. You know.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe for now we'll stick with that translation.
I like it. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Any other thoughts, observations?
Yes, I don't think it's an operative principle for modern Americans to have that such a high bar, because the absolute, well, now not the necessary. There are so many things that really can't be justified as necessary, such as a liberal arts education.
No, I think I can justify it.
I could too. That's
education. A liberal arts, it can kind of lay a foundation of how to think about things outside of a religious sense.
You know, I think it changes. The Ramchal did give us this out, you know, because for each of us, what's necessary is different. You know, in any time, a doctor might tell you, you know what, you need a vacation. You know what I mean? You're stressed out. Go take a break.
Okay.
You know, go to a hotel, go swimming, sit by the beach, whatever. I don't know, go somewhere. And we can all see situations where that's necessary. Now, and we can all imagine that for some people that might be more necessary and more or necessary more often than for others. You know, and different times in history, what's necessary for a person now is probably very different than what was necessary for a person in the Ramchal's time. And that's what the Shikal Adas is about, you know. Yeah.
I'm left with more questions than I have answers. Thanks.
Well, that's good. That means we've had a good session. That's the way it's supposed to be. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for joining me. Whoever's coming tomorrow night to Kuzari, I'll see you tomorrow. If not, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I guess that's, what is that, February? No, it'd be March 3rd. It would already be March next time we learn. All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Bye,
All right. Take
everybody.
care. Bye.